show about Jewish books, music, film, and web. I'm Heidi Estrin. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. Additional support comes from the Association of Jewish Libraries. The 22nd annual Helen and Stan Vine Canadian Jewish Book Awards were announced in April 2010 by the Koffler Centre of the Arts in Toronto. In May, our own Canadian correspondent, Anne Dublin, attended the award ceremony. During the reception, she mingled with the authors and had the chance to record these interviews with Eva Wiseman, Goldie Siegel, Robin McGrath, and Howard Engel, 4 out of this year's 9 winners. You'll hear a lot of background buzz from the joyful event, but bear with us, it gets easier to hear as it goes on. For a full list of Canadian Jewish Book Award winners, visit bookoflifepodcast.com.
Born in Hungary, Eva Wiseman came to Canada with her family when she was a girl. She began writing at a young age. She has won numerous awards for her books for children and young adults. Her novel, Puppet, won this year's award for youth literature. Eva, I'm so pleased to meet you at last. Please tell us briefly what your book is about.
Well, Puppet is based upon one of the last blood libel trials in Hungary, which took place from 1882 to 1883, and one of the main protagonists was a boy called Maurice Shaw, and I tell his story in Puppet.
And when you were writing this book, did you find it was difficult to separate the fiction from the non-fiction?
I read the original trial transcript in Hungarian, and it was all Hungarian, and I'm fluent in Hungarian, speaking it, but reading it is a torture for me. Salvage joke, but that alone I should get the Jewish Book Award. Events of the case are fact. However, I introduced a fictional narrator, a non-Jewish girl, a servant girl, and that's fiction.
Well, that's really interesting to see the balance, the interaction between those two groups, together and yet not together.
Exactly. That's a very good way of putting it.
Eva Wiseman, thank you very much, and congratulations on winning the Canadian Jewish Book Award for Youth Literature.
Thank you so much. I feel honored to receive it.
Goldie Siegel is a former Judaica librarian at McGill University in Montreal. She edited A Garment Worker's Legacy, the Joe Fishstein collection of Yiddish poetry. Now retired, she leads the Yiddish Lehenkreis group and continues to participate in activities involving books, art, music, and Yiddish. Goldie's book, Stingy Boozy and King Solomon, received the Yiddish Award. Written and illustrated in full color, this book is a comic book with a difference. The dialogue balloons are in Yiddish script with transliteration and translation into English under each illustration. So Goldie, I have some questions for you, and I see that you're holding the book.
You gave English name, right? Which
yes.
Appears on the cover on the left side, and on the right is Der Karger und der König Schleune, the Yiddish equivalent.
Thanks, Goldie. I was afraid to try to pronounce it, but I'm really glad that you did. So I was saying that my first language, my Mama Loshen, is Yiddish, and so I was very excited to see that there is a book in Yiddish for children and in the form of a comic book.
It reveals itself in the comic book form, in the balloons of the characters, which are written in Yiddish script, and underneath each image, on the left there's an idiomatic English translation, and on the right there's a transliteration into Roman alphabet for people who cannot read the Hebrew alphabet.
So what led you to writing this book?
So the first edition, as it were, started in the 1970s when, as part of home and school, a group of mothers were concerned that Yiddish was not really supplied with enough creative materials. And so there were two of us that decided to try our hand at it. Someone showed me the script of a Yiddish play, a kind of musical play that had been put together by a teacher in the 1940s. And the person who showed it to me said, look, I know you can draw caricatures and so on. How about making a comic strip out of this? See what you can do. Take things from it and make a comic strip, which is what I did. And that was black and white. It was very much a homemade affair, stapled together, used by the grade 3s and grade 4s of the Yiddish Volksschule, the Jewish People's Schools in Montreal. And at the end of each year, they would take one of those pages and Xerox them, staple them, they'd freehold. They had more printing. And so years passed, and the computer came into being, and I thought, gee, if I take the black and white page, just one image to a page, scan it, color it, put it on a sheet by itself, translation on the left, transliteration on the right, it might reach a larger audience.
So exciting for me to see that now this is a modern rebirth of an old story.
Yes, and of course, being Yiddish, then the generations come into it. The parents have to read it to the children, or perhaps the grandparents. So it becomes like an intergenerational thing.
That's very exciting. So children who go to the Volksschule now, maybe their parents went before and they read the book and so on.
Hopefully,
so it's wonderful that it does go from generation to generation. Yeah. Goldie Siegel, it's been a pleasure speaking with you this evening. I wish you all the best and congratulations again on winning the Canadian Jewish Book Award for Yiddish.
Thank you so much.
Robin McGrath is the author and editor of 15 books. She has also published over 200 pieces in magazines such as Beaver, Inuit Art Quarterly, Parchment, Tickle-Ace, Fiddlehead, and Room of One's Own. Robin was born in Newfoundland and lives in Labrador with her husband. The Winter House won this year's Canadian Jewish Book Award for fiction. It's a compelling novel about finding oneself and creating one's own community. Robin, please tell us briefly what your book is about.
Well, there's two stories sort of tied together in it. The older story is the story of a Jewish remittance man, essentially, who came out from England to a small island that was just sort of beginning to get involved in the fishery as a merchantman, representing the fish merchants out of Trinity Bay. And he's in rather hard shape when he arrives, having had a bit of a shipwreck and so on. And he's married off to a child, essentially, a young girl of about 13 or 14 years old. And they spend the winter on this island in the winter houses. People used to move back from the water into the tilts in the bush, where they could keep themselves warm and so on. And he teaches her a little bit about the outside world, and she teaches him a little bit about how to survive in the new world. And the second layer is a couple of Jewish historians, contemporary time, who are writing back and forth between England and Newfoundland, trying to track down what happened to this man, and finding little clues to his life and trying to piece together the story.
I always am fascinated by where authors get their ideas.
Well, I had written before this an oral history of the Jews of Newfoundland and Labrador. I called it a folk history or an oral history because there are not many documents, but we have an extremely rich oral culture and lots of these stories of the early Jews who came out in the 18th and 19th century, late 18th and 19th century, prior to the influx of Eastern European Jews, which are the ones that people always think of when they think of the peddlers and all that. But they came out from Plymouth mostly, and some of them stayed in Newfoundland, some of them went on to other places, and the remnants of their families have forgotten their heritage. But there's always these little seeds, these little stories that you hear. And so, for instance, I heard one story from one of the Jewish peddlers, a Holocaust survivor, who went to a small community in Trinity Bay, and the old grandfather over in the corner beckoned his grandson to go upstairs and bring down a sea trunk. And when he brought it down, there was a prayer shawl and Hebrew Bible and so on in the trunk. And he said his name had been Moshe, and that it had been changed to Mos because people didn't recognize the name, and that he was actually Jewish. that was just one little piece of it, but there are all these other stories of other lost Jews, I guess you'd call them, who, their families know they do certain things, they have certain traditions that are like a little odd within the context of a Christian culture, and it's the remnants of these Jewish people who came out.
It's fascinating. It's almost like the conversos,
yes,
who lost so many of their customs and traditions, but held on to a few that
yes,
still differentiated them from, let's say, the general.
Yeah. At that time, of course, in the early days, you were not allowed to settle if you were Roman Catholic. They didn't ever ban Jews because it never occurred to them that Jews would come. So if you had to declare yourself a Protestant of some sort, and I understand that many of the early Jews declared themselves as Methodists because they didn't have to be baptized, and so that was their holdup.
Well, while you were researching the book, were there any particular problems that you ran into?
I worried about the acceptance that the Jewish community, my Jewish community in St. John's, would feel about the book, about a piece of fiction being written essentially about Jewish ancestors and attitudes, which were different then, of course. But they've been extremely supportive and very kind to me.
Dare I ask you what you're working on now?
Well, I'm just finishing up editing a translation of a travel journal by Henri de Lechon from 1883. It's a translation that my father did when I was a young girl, and he died before he could get it published, and so I've finally picked up that last thread, and just a little unfinished business I'd like to get out, and it will be out within the month.
So it's translated from the French?
From French, yes. And it's never been published in English.
Well, I look forward to seeing it out in print and out in the world. Robin McGrath, thank you so much for speaking with me today, and congratulations
Thank
again
you very much. It's a great
on winning
honor.
this wonderful award.
Thank you.
Canadian crime writer Howard Engel will be honored with a Special Achievement Award for his long and distinguished writing career and contribution to the field. Engel is best known for his mystery series featuring the internationally recognized Jewish-Canadian detective Benny Cooperman, who has been featured in 12 novels. Benny Cooperman's soft-boiled approach to crime fighting reflects his Canadian and Jewish roots and has inspired mystery writers all over the world. Howard Engel, it's a pleasure to speak with you tonight. Firstly, congratulations on this special award.
Well, thank you very much.
What is it about mystery writing that appeals to you?
It's not like writing a sonnet, There are too many rules in writing a sonnet. It has to be 16 lines. I think it's 16 lines.
Don't ask me.
But anyway, a lot of the other forms have very strict rules, and it seemed to me that I lucked into the mystery genre early enough on, before I knew any better. But I've been enjoying it. I like the open form, and I like the Canadian and American style of mystery writing better than the British, where it's all rather plotted and staged. You have to have it in a country house on an island surrounded by raging seas when the bridge is out, or something like that. It's just a bit restricted. The American style, Dashiell Hammett and others, they're open-ended, fun to work in.
And I guess, in a way, you can make your own rules, too, as you go along.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes. You just roll the dice and see what happens.
How has your writing changed over the years? When you look back at the early writing and what you've been doing recently, can you see any changes?
I think I notice different things in other people's writings now that I think are a bit more perceptive about what I read. But also, too, in the last couple of days, people have said that my last couple of books are easily my best, and so I've collected quite a few compliments in the last week. So that maybe I'm getting better.
Which leads me to my next question. Do you have a favorite book that you've written, or is the favorite one the one you're working on right now?
It's usually the one you're working on right now, but I finished that book, my favorite book, just 2 or 3 days ago, and so now I have nothing in my machine. I am not a work in progress, and I am a nuisance to have around the house.
but soon I imagine you'll start
I
something
guess
else.
something is rebrewing. It hasn't tapped me on the shoulder yet, but I'll know it when it comes.
Howard Engel, thank you very much for speaking with me this evening.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
And congratulations again for
Thank you,
your
Anne.
very special award.
There are so many ways to connect with the Book of Life. Fan us at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. You can also listen to the latest episode by phone at 916-313-3820. And, of course, find links to everything at bookoflifepodcast.com. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida, at cbiboca.org, and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band at freilachmakers.com. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.